Welcome to Botches Off-Road. Join us as we talk about everything from gear reviews to trail stories, tent camping to rock landing, and all things to do with the outdoors. Today we have a very special guest, Michigan's premier overland.
Oh, no.
Michigan's premier overland influencer, Mr. Bypass himself, Derek Van Stroren.
Yeah,
Did I say that right?
Close enough, man. It's Dutch. We'll take it.
So yeah.
I mean, it's I'm the overland influencer, hence the bypasses. If I was an off-road influencer, we wouldn't have that bypass. So we'll asterisk there.
I mean, at least you own up to it.
I'm scared of everything. That's right. Scared of that 8-inch axle on the GX blowing up.
Well, I don't even know. Does the 4Runner have an 8-inch? I don't even know what's under that thing.
The 4th Gen 4Runner has the 8-inch, which is like the 80s mini truck axle. They've been using it forever. And then the FJ Cruiser from 07 up to 2010 has the 8-inch. Then they switched to the 8.2. The nice part is because of that, they're a direct fit between the 8-inch and the 8.2. You can just swap them around.
Oh, 8.2 a lot stronger.
That's a lot stronger. Yeah, so the 8-inch, it has some issues with if you bounce it on a surface that has traction. So like if you're in rocks out west, if you bounce the rear end a little bit and it comes down while you're on the gas, it gets some deflection in there just enough so that everything moves around just enough to just tear up all the gears. So it's pretty common on the GX. There's a collage out there with 15 or 20 videos of GXs all just blowing their diffs on rocks.
Jesus.
Well, yeah, cool.
So I guess on that front, we already know you drive a GX. If you want to tell us a little bit about your GX and the mods you got going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty basic build. I've got Ironman Foam Cell Pro suspension on it. I chose that because Tinker Design said it was good. And it's pretty good. It's a 2.8-inch shock body. The coolest thing on it, I think, is the Perry Parts bump stops. That's those new 3D printed ones that are like half the price of Duro bumps and same performance. So I'm not sponsored or affiliated with Perry Parts, but if you're looking for some cheap bump stops that just kick ass, Perry Parts is the way to go. The truck. Go ahead.
This guy that started Duro Bumps, he's doing a lot of cool stuff. He, going from, we used to only have really hydraulic bump stops, and going from just hydraulic to what we've got with Duro Bumps, or even Perry Parts?
Yeah, Perry Parts is 3D printed. Yeah. It's really cool.
They
just 3D print like nitrogen bubbles into the.
It's just crazy how far bump stops have come.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, like Perry Parts, he's got access to all the at-home testing stuff now. So like he can prototype and test in one day, which is really cool.
That's super cool.
And then the truck came with all Victory armor on it, so it's got roof rack, front and rear bumpers with swing out. It's super Gucci. Like the welds on it are beautiful. But Victory's pricey. I wouldn't get Victory again just because it's so dang expensive.
Did you have the Victory skid plate or no?
So that's actually OK Expedition. And I went with them because it's aluminum, and then the exchange rate out of Canada. So they're out of Canada, and the exchange rate was really favorable when I bought it. So it ended up costing about as much as the ARB skids. Yeah, I think it was like $500. It's a full belly length skid, so it goes all the way back to your like middle cross member. So it's a really nice setup. I like it a lot more than the ARB. The ARB sucks. Like I know a bunch of people have just folded those ARBs up.
And it's way cheaper than what my Savage was, because that was like a $500 skid, $500 or $600 skid.
Yeah, and this is like a 2-piece too. So you get the front skid and then the mid skid as well. So
that's not
bad. I thought it was pretty good value.
But that's not your. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. So let's talk about Mitten State Tours.
Well, that's where we were getting. I was going to say, do you want to tell the story on how you started Michigan's only good overland group?
Yeah. So I don't know if we're Michigan's only good overland group. I think there's a few floating around there that are really small that do some cool stuff. And like every now and then I'll catch a glimpse of someone I know, and it's like just a story they're tagged in. I'm like, hey, you guys are doing something cool. Where's my invite? Um, they did that one group. They went out to Boise Blocks, the island just south um, of Mackinac Island, and that
I
was
didn't even
really
know we
cool.
could go there.
Yeah, you can go there. I think the ferry is expensive. The wheeling isn't exciting, but it's like super scenic, and you're right there in Mackinac City, Mackinac Island
Right.
area. So it's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, so I started Mitten State Tours. So how did Joe and I? So it really started. Originally I just had an Instagram, and I didn't know anything about really off-roading in Michigan. I'd gone to the dunes and stuff in high school, but I didn't know anything else about it. Never gone on trails. So I just got an Instagram, and what I'd do is I'd find a location that looked interesting, and I'd search the Instagram location tags, right? And anyone who was at that tag would get a message from me like, "Hey, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me how to get here? What it's like?" And I eventually I met up with a couple guys who were pretty cool. Dave G, he still wheels with us sometime. He had neck surgery, so he's been out this year, but he'll come out with us. And David Blank and a couple other guys. Um, and we kind of did like Tin Cup and like Allegan and Yankee, just like very dipping your toes in it. And then I caught wind of, I don't know, I'm not going to say the Jeep Club, but it was a Jeep Club doing a trail ride. And I just kind of saw people talk about it, like, oh, that sounds like fun. So I went out to that, and I was at the trailhead that they were at. I don't remember what trail it was, but I was like, hey, do you guys care if I just kind of tag along? I'm kind of new to this, and thought it'd be good to go out with some other people. And they're like, well, you can follow us, but we're not gonna stop for you if you get stuck or anything. I'm like, well, okay, cool. And it was like a super easy trail. It was like Yankee Spring style. Like it was not hard at all. I'm like, you guys didn't need to be a dick about that. You could have just not said that.
I think that's the Jeep Club I got pushed out of too.
I would guess if it's in our area, probably.
Yeah. They're I hear they've gotten better, but they really didn't like me back in like 2016.
There's a lot of people who when you talk to them, it's like, oh yeah, I did the Jeep Club thing for a while. It just wasn't really my thing. And then if you sit down and have a beer with them, you find out like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Um, so like that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I just kind of started getting a group of people together at the time, and we didn't have any idea besides, hey, I enjoyed this more with people. I thought it was more fun than going solo.
Right.
So I just randomly messaged people who looked like they were interesting and they didn't have Jeeps. So that's why I started out, because it was like, oh, the Jeep people don't want me, so I'll just message anyone who has literally anything else. Um, so that's kind of why we're a little Toyota heavy is because when we started out, it was a lot of Toyotas, just because I was a little bitter about the Jeep guys.
We've got a good amount of Jeeps now though.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, and it's taking a little work to try and keep all the tribes happy sometimes. um, so I started just like organizing, like, hey, we're gonna go to Tin Cup. Hey, we're gonna go to Roush Off Road or whatever. Eventually, someone's like, hey, it's way easier to organize these things if you get on Facebook. So we got on Facebook, and I found Michigan Overland. I was like, oh, let's do a trail ride. So I put an event on Michigan Overland, and at the time, there's like 8,000 people in that group. I think there's 10,000 plus now. And like when I'd organize on Instagram, like man, I would have to like message a ton of people to get 5 people to come out, right? Like I'd have to sit there and so I was expecting maybe 7 or 8, show up. No shit, we had like 60 or 70 people show up. And I pulled into the trailhead at Tin Cup, and I'm looking around going, what the hell? Yeah, I think we had 65 or 66 trucks was the count. And that's when I got the ticket, too, from the DNR for parking on the power lines. They're like, we could rate you a $500 ticket for every vehicle over 20 people here. And I'm like, please don't. Like,
So
please
do
don't.
they do it by people, not by vehicles?
Yeah, so you can have either 20 trucks in a group with one person in each, or you can have 5 trucks with, 5 people in them, and then, or
That's
yeah, 4 people in them. Good at math. Um, yeah, so I mean, legally, yeah, I mean, most of our events, like, if the DNR showed up and wanted to be jerks about it, they could.
right.
Um, we try and kind of like, so like on Drummond, when you see us split the camps up and split the groups into different trail groups, that's kind of how we mitigate that. Just so that it's like, yeah, we're not in a group with them. We're just enjoying each other's company right now.
We're just here at
Yep.
the same time as them.
Yeah, yeah. It's like if 20 people, yeah, if 60 people just show up on their own and you decide to drive around 10 cup, that's fine. But as an organized group, that's suddenly a problem. So
Man, the DNR is freaking dumb.
yeah, I don't get me. We can get into that later
Yes.
because um so yeah, so then like at the time, like Joe and I had hung out a lot, and he came to most of the events. So like Joe and I were like, well, we want to do some stuff in the UP and some overlanding, and we were like, organizing with such a huge group, like we want a little more control over it, and we don't want to have 8 million people show up. Joe didn't want 8 million. I was like, cool, yeah, let's bring them all out. That'll be fun. Um, like Joe's a good counterbalance to me because like where I'm aggressive on stuff, Joe's conservative, and where I'm conservative on stuff, Joe's aggressive. So we kind of butt heads on
Yep.
things, but it's definitely a balance that works just because we kind of counteract our worst tendencies with each other.
We have the same thing with me and Gavin, so we
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. So we talked about it, like, well, let's just kind of look into starting our own kind of thing. And originally we kind of said, well, what if we did guided tours? Because obviously everyone wants to be guided by a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing. So we looked into that, and like I talked to a couple people, and the amount of work, like I talked to the guys from Michigan Gambler, and they said don't do it. They said first of all it's crazy expensive, and then they said as soon as you like file a route plan with the DNR and they approve it, they said guess who shows up at your camp every night and then
Yep.
ticket you for anything they find. So Michigan Gambler had incurred a ton of fines because the DNR did that. They came to their camp and just ticketed them for firing too close to the trail, or not, a vehicle parked 15 feet off the trail instead of 10, whatever. So, so they were like, don't do that. So we're like, well, forget it. Let's just make it free. Like, we're not that good anyway. We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
So we just kind of built it off that. And we started out with just kind of people who we had met at some of these off-road events that we'd hosted at like Roush and stuff. And, I'd see someone in Michigan Overland, be like, oh yeah, I kind of want to do something. I've never done this before. And I just shoot them a message and be like, hey, if you want to go out with a smaller group or whatever, um, let me know. I've got this, kind of smaller, less public group that, and we do all this, we do it for free. And, you'll have some people who kind of know what they're doing, at least, so you're not by yourself. So that's kind of how it started. And then we ended up finding really cool campsites, like right off the bat. Like I spent hours just scouring the UP shoreline with, satellite view on one side and the public land overlay on the other side of the screens, and just going like inch by inch and be like, okay, this looks cool. And like we ended up finding like 3 or 4 really cool campsites in the UP right off the bat, like our first few trips. And I think that's really kind of spread word of mouth, like, hey, these guys go really cool places and they'll take you there. So I think that's how it grew. And then, from there, it's just like, I think we have a good mix of like, hey, a little bit of chaos. Like we embrace it a little bit. Like you go to some events and it's so over organized and so sanitized, and you're like, this just feels like what a McKinsley and Company organized this thing. It feels so not fake, but like, so managed that you can't really do things that you want to naturally do.
Right.
Or, let's go off on this trail spur or that trail spur. So I think people enjoy kind of the aspect where you can kind of make your own adventure, but you still have, people around who you enjoy being around. So I think that's kind of part of what's fun. Like we don't have really any big guidelines besides don't be a dick and clean up after yourself. It's not like, oh, you have to have your um fire extinguisher under your seat, and some of these rides that's like the list of requirements. It's like, good lord, man, like you got to dump $1,000 into your truck just to go out and wheel
Right.
with them. So
I
I
know
think,
some local Jeep clubs like that.
yeah, it's like, oh, you got to have 35s. Oh, you got to have at least one locker. And it's like, dude, we'll figure it out. It's Michigan. Like, why are you making all these requirements for Michigan? Even Drummond, we got people who go through without lockers.
I never turned my locker on the entire time we were at Drummond.
I'll say I don't have lockers on mine anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on open diffs, and at the end of the day, like, yeah, in Drummond, you guys go through some harder stuff than I will, but we still got to enjoy the island, and we still
Yeah.
are sitting around the campfire having a beer. So,
And I'd say, I mean, we took Mark's truck up Muse Nemesis, and
Yep.
I'd say that's probably the hardest thing there. So,
yeah,
and
I think technically, like, Moose Nemesis, especially on the line on the, I want to say it's the north side,
Mm-hmm.
is, that's really difficult. You watch people like Andy Hanna, who's got, tons and 40s on his Tacoma. And it's like, yeah, he doesn't always make it up the first time either.
Right. Yeah, and then, I mean, and we won't get too far into Marblehead. We've kind of been avoiding that topic. But even post-destruction or pre-destruction Marblehead, I mean, it's a decent challenge, but it's not necessarily a hard obstacle.
No,
not it's from Michigan. If you've only ever wheeled in Michigan, right? Like this is your first opportunity to learn technical wheeling, right? Like you're gonna learn how your truck reacts to being off camber, to the different traction situations that you cover. So I think that's what made Marblehead so iconic was you could start out really easily.
Yep.
And then if you spend a few hours there, you could go from a very easy line, not knowing how to do anything, to a really something seriously challenging and learning how to do that. So that was the draw to Marblehead was like, man, I can start out easy and then work my way up into, having some real confidence to know what I'm doing. And them destroying that easy line on the side is like, boy, now it's all or nothing, right? Like either you're on 35s at least and locker, or you're not getting up that.
Yeah, and we don't have anything else like that in the state. I mean, even hill climb wise, we've got Muse Nemesis, Marblehead. I'd say Skidder, but Skidder's difficult for a different reason.
Yeah. Skidder, you can get stuck going down just because, you got a stream flowing down the side. There is harder stuff than Drummond in Michigan. You have to know some very specific and very private Ubers. I'm not going to say the name, but I think you guys have seen me talking about it before. But yeah, I mean, when you look at that, that's like buggy trails that you see in like the Appalachians because it's they're rolling trucks just trying to get through the trail. And it's like not a one-off. It's happening, and you see like the body damage they do. And but that's on private property, and it's like if you don't know someone there, you're not going to get in.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors of there's two other places in Michigan. One of them near the mouth of the Huron, where it's private property, but it's like pretty well used by locals for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen pictures of guys going up a certain mountain. There's no mountains, but it's a mountain near there. And it's like, yeah, you got to be on 40s and locked to get up that. So there's some places, but you really got to know somebody to get to those places.
Public wise, Drummond was really all we had.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there's a little bit in the Keweenaw. There's some gnarly stuff in the Keweenaw, but yeah, besides that, yeah, Drummond was probably the hardest in Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a handful of other hill climbs. They've all got their own challenge, but none of them are that straight rock hill climb that you had in Drummond.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna miss, especially those steps coming out from Glen Cove.
Oh
You
my
know,
God.
that was just fun because it wasn't that hard, but it's like the first, like for the guys who, hey, we've never gone before and coming with Mitten State Tours on a trip, like that's their first real obstacle, right? We
Yep.
get there the first night, we set up camp, and we say, hey, we're gonna go out to Marblehead and watch the sunset at Marblehead. And like the first real obstacle that you encounter is these stairs, and it's really fun because you get to see all these guys who have never done anything like that get to
Yep.
experience that for the first time. And it's like, dude, that's like the most excited you'll see someone that weekend is some guy when he gets up to the top of that the first time, and he's like, his knuckles are white on the wheel, and he's got adrenaline pumping, and you're like, dude, this guy's like, he's hooked, like, right, he's having a awesome weekend.
Yeah.
So that's the bummer about that, because it's like that was an obstacle that was really like the first thing you think about when you go on an MST trip to Drummond is like those stairs. That's the first hard thing you encounter, and it's like now it's gone, and that was kind of an exciting taste of the island, kind of. So
I
yeah, I mean,
was really looking forward to seeing a GMC terrain go up them steps.
yeah, yeah. Zach is. They made it very Zachable.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a word yet, but I think that's gonna be.
But I was really excited once he got this lift that he put on it now to watch him be able to do stuff like that with a car that shouldn't be able to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, that's always fun, right?
he's got no chance now because they just took it out.
Yeah. Well, did you guys see in the chat Chill 233 at Leatherwood?
Yes,
You see
I'm
the
really
pictures of that? Dude, that like I told Zach, like, hey man, a Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk got back here, like
yeah.
similar, right? Like he said he didn't use his rear locker. So like, hey man, like you've got an opportunity.
Isn't the terrain all-wheel drive though, not true four-wheel drive?
Yeah, it's all wheel. Yeah, and I wouldn't trust that transmission where you're going to be like some of those ledges. Like, oh man, I want to push you, but maybe not 8 hours from home.
We've got a Trailhawk in our group, and we've seen him do some stuff, but I've seen him do stuff I don't think that terrain can do.
Yeah, no, those Trailhawks, dude. I've watched some videos on YouTube, and it's like they definitely are deserving of the Cherokee name. Right? Like you don't get the solid axles. But dude, I've seen owners who don't care if they damage them do some wild stuff.
Oh yeah,
like stuff that I wouldn't do with the GX, which isn't really saying a whole lot, but you know.
Yes, I've watched you bypass stuff that was like two-wheel drivable.
Yeah, I didn't want to get my tires muddy. Well, for me, like here's been the biggest difference between like Joe and I. So Joe's the other. Joe really enjoys the wheeling. Like, the harder it is, the more challenging. He really enjoys that. I like that. I think for me, it's more about the community. I get a lot more kick of hanging out around camp, or just the trail ride. The radio banter and stuff like that with some mild obstacles. I enjoy that a lot. I'll do the obstacles just because everyone bullies me now. But no, I enjoy the community aspect of MST a lot more than I mean, I enjoy wheeling, I really do, but it's not like I'm gonna have a good trip even if the trails aren't like super difficult.
Yeah, I've since coming home, I've really lowered my expectations. Now, as long as there's dirt, it's all right.
Yeah. Well, it's like when we did the South Shore exploratory trip, right? Like, there wasn't anything that you would have had to go into four-wheel drive for besides the Thunderbolt. But, like, the whole trip was awesome, man. Like, we got to camp right on Lake Michigan. Awesome spots. We got to see some really kind of cool scenic stuff that's really overlooked in the UP because everyone either hits they either go Drummond, they go the North Coast, or they go up to the Keweenaw. So there's big sections of that people just don't really go to unless
Yeah.
they're passing by. So we got to see some really cool stuff. And I had a riot. Like, yeah, I mean, if I could have probably done most of it in a Buick, and it was still a really really good time.
I've definitely been through most of the Manistee National Forest in a Buick, so I understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's there's always kind of that trade off, right? Between, hey, I want to go out there and just enjoy nature versus, hey, I want to go find fun stuff. And it's like, I always kind of wondered, why do people enjoy Yankee Springs so much? Because it's just some gravel roads to the woods. They filled in like the only one real hard obstacle there. And it's just like, yeah, people just really enjoy getting out and driving around on some gravel roads. And I think, I get that now a little more than I used to.
Especially people in that area, because down in that part of Michigan, you don't have a whole lot of that just get out and explore going on.
Yeah, there's really south of like Muskegon. Well, south of you guys, south of Newaygo,
Yeah.
there isn't really anything. Like Friday, we're going Christmas tree hunting by Muskegon because there's just like some little slivers of Manistee National Forest along the White River. So we're gonna go do that on Friday. But like, yeah, it's like you got a really thin line of national forest until you hit Newaygo. Then you really have options to go explore.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very thankful to have grown up somewhere where wheeling was all we really did, and we just had lots of it to do. But now that I've seen like what you guys struggle with just having nothing around you, I feel way better about that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why, going back to the community aspect is, if you want to have fun off-roading in Michigan and you're gonna go solo, like, let's just be real, like, after a year or two, you're gonna be like, man, there's nothing really exciting in Michigan.
Yeah.
And you get kind of to the point where you're like, I don't know if maybe this isn't a hobby that I want to do. But when you have a group like MST, it's like, man, just driving, if you've ever been in a convoy with like Yamber and I and Karen, and they're sniping from the back, it's like, man, this is a hoot. Like, this is just as much fun just driving up there as anything else. It's about that, it's a community that's
Yep.
enjoyable to be around.
I like when we're out just naturally driving, going somewhere, and someone like, for example, one time Joe ran into us in Newaygo, and he just pulled up and hopped on channel 18 and knew who we were right away.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just,
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say it's interesting now because 16 used to be the channel, and now I think almost everyone at MST like naturally just uses 18 now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
16 for a long time, 16 was considered the like off-road channel on
yeah,
GMRS.
because 4x4, right?
Yeah, and then 18 and 19 were supposed to be highway channels. And then one of them supposed to be emergency, but I don't remember which one that was.
I always kind of get a kick out of that when someone's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do some solo camping. What radio should I get?" And they're talking about GMRS. I'm like, dude, don't even if you're solo, like get ham or you get a satellite communicator. Like when we're up in the UP, I'll just click mine to scan, and there's no one else out there.
Yeah.
Like you can call out on all the channels, no one's listening. It's whatever group you're with. Maybe you'll get lucky and there'll be another Jeep group up there. But yeah, if you're going solo, GMRS is not the answer. It's either ham or a satellite communicator.
Yeah. Out west, there's a lot of GMRS communications out west, but they can go for 50, 60 miles because there's nothing in the way.
Yeah, when you got some elevation that you're on top of and you got no force to deal with, yeah, you can do that.
I used to go camping on a mountain up above the city I lived in Arizona, and I just turned the radio on and just listened to everyone down below me talking.
Yeah, that's fun and then you try and pick them out. Like, oh, you hear a couple guys talking, and they're describing an obstacle, and you're like, okay, what? I bet it's those two guys there because that kind of looks like what they're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
We used to
Yeah.
do that when, like my grandpa lived in Colorado, and we kind of used to do the same thing. I think he was on CB then. But yeah, you sit there and you listen to people going by, and it was like, oh yeah, who do I think that one is?
Yeah, CB used to be big around here. When I was in high school, all of us had CBs in our trucks, and now I don't hear anything on CB.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is yeah, the cell phones kind of killed CB, right? Like
Yep.
it went from a lot of people it was popular. Like my wife tells me like her grandfather, he would drive. I think he went to somewhere around Lansing he worked at, and then he had a CB in his car. And there's a base station at his house, and when he got 5-10 miles, he'd call in on the CB because they didn't have cell phones back then,
Right.
right? And he'd say, "Oh, hey, I'm coming home," and it was like, at least give his wife some time to get, whatever the house or the kids or whatever cleaned up and
Right.
ready.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, the cell phone killed CB, and then GMRS is really just a hobbyist thing now. It's survivalists who want to be able to communicate and off-roaders. I don't
Yeah.
really know who else uses it.
I know there's a really big community. I used to spend a lot of time with them, but they do what's called nets. And we'd get on every Friday night and we'd do like trivia and stuff over the GMRS radios. But now that the FCC made it so you can't have internet connected GMRS networks, that kind of killed our nets.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, did they do that because it was clogging up channels where people were complaining?
They did it because they hate us.
That's yeah. Hey, these guys are doing something that's really effective and fun, and we can't really regulate it, so we're gonna just shut it down.
Yeah, I actually was working on a GMRS network that was going to tie together as many points as I could get here in Michigan. So we'd have one big internet connected network, and Channel 18, if you could be in, say, Lansing and talk to someone in Detroit. But
yeah, I never really, I haven't, I'll have to sit down with you guys because as you can see when I was trying to connect to this, I'm like a technological boomer, right? Like I'm just, it's probably pathetic for being a millennial, but like I hear like when we're cruising, I'll hear repeaters, and it's like, dude, I don't have any idea how to connect to these dumb things. Like, what button do I push to get on that stupid repeater?
yeah, do you have a Type C on your radio, or is it a USB-A?
I've got a USB-C on it. Like I can charge
Okay.
my phone off of it or whatever.
Yep. So we should be able to get yours on repeaters. I have the old USB-A, and it doesn't do repeaters at all.
Oh, okay.
I can hear them, but I can't talk to them.
I was about to say, I think my new walkie, you can have it where it seeks out repeaters or don't seek out repeaters on new ones.
Yeah, because then you got to program it with like your FCC registration number or whatever to ping into a repeater the first time or something. I thought
Some repeaters require that, some don't.
Yeah, I don't know if I
really
want to talk
depends.
to that. It's just on who sets it up, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the repeater network's pretty cool.
I always wondered about that. Like, can you set up like a mobile repeater? So, like, if you brought a trailer with like with a 20-foot whip on it and a big old battery pack, could you set up a repeater on Drummond Island for the whole group to use?
We are working on one.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we've been in the talks about it, especially with our mesh network system that we're going to work on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me more about that, because that will show you not only so that sends out your GPS location on a map when you radio, right? How does that work?
So the Mesh-tastic, you have yours set to what, every 10 seconds, Mark?
Yes.
So every 10 seconds, they send out our location across a radio frequency, and it can go anywhere from 1 mile to like 50 miles, depending on how clear it is. And they're just itty bitty little radios that send out like 2 watts of power, and they send GPS signal. You can send out like little bits of data, like let's say we're on ATAC and there's a trail that's got something blocking it, we can put a marker on ATAC and it'll send that over the radio.
Oh.
We can text message over it.
So does it run off like a cell phone, or how do you?
So there's a few different ways. I have, one second. I have this one. This one's just a handheld. It doesn't have any need for a phone. But then you can also get them where you have to use the app on your phone. Yeah, like that one Mark's got right there.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's lots of ways to use Meshtastic.
Because one of the things I've always wondered, with MST, like, we haven't really gotten split up and lost as a group since 2022. But, like, I always kind of wondered, like, man, it would be really cool if I could just plop something in somebody's car, every 3 or 4 cars so you can see where everyone is.
Yep.
That's exactly what Meshtastic is supposed to do. And it's mesh. So let's say you're the first car and you can only talk to the third car. Well, that third car is going to repeat and send whatever you sent to the 8th car, and then you'll get the signal back across the same network.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that.
So
yeah, because sometimes when we get in a convoy and it's strung out, like at the beginning of a trip, right? Like I'll say, hey, if you're halfway through the convoy, make sure to repeat back what I said so the people behind us can hear. And by the end of it, it's like, oh man, we're sitting here. Oh, we've been here for 5 minutes. Did we lose them? Nope. They're just slowly punching along. No one's been relaying the messages.
Yeah, that's we've been kind of playing with Meshtastic. Once we get it really well solidified, we're probably going to grab some nodes and get some other people to experiment with it.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. I'd love to see how you figure out how to do that cheaply for large groups.
Well, so the cheapest node you can get, which is the one in my truck, I think it's like $18.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're really cheap.
So you can set that up, like if I bought 8 of them, let's say, you can set that up so I could just set them in my buddy's trucks, and then as we're on a trail ride, they just talk to each other, and I can see where my buddies are the whole time.
Yep. In theory, that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. There was someone that was working on it, I think, about 2 to 3 years ago, and they dropped the project that they were working on, so we have no idea how that went for them.
Yeah, there was a YouTube channel called Beyond the Raptor, and he was working on an off-road specific app that used Meshtastic to send location data.
Well, you just got to stalk them, and then like I did with half the people in MST.
I've commented on the video and been like, hey, man, whatever happened with this channel or with this plan, and then never heard back.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, like, that's how I grew MST, right? Like, if you ask, like, the first 300 members, it's like, yeah, some weirdo just messaged me on Instagram and said, hey, do you want to go out in the woods with me? I've got hot dogs.
Oh, I forgot the whole hot dog thing.
Yeah, so you guys weren't around for the hot dog thing.
No.
When I first started, I worked at Kent Quality Foods, which is a Grand Rapids manufacturer of specialty hot dogs and sausages. So like every off, I was the dog guy. Every off-road event that we had, I'd bring my grill along. This is when I actually grilled my own food instead of having other people do it. And I'd bring like a 10-pound box of like Polish sausage and be like, hey, we're gonna grill this up, man. Everyone gets free hot dogs. And like most of the time, because I had the cheapest grill possible, it's like, yeah, you get some lukewarm hot dogs, baby. How do you like that? But yeah, I mean that's the hot dog joke. Is like, yeah, MST was built on free hot dogs and stalking.
Yeah, it's you were that internet stalker that all of our influencer friends warn us about.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you talk to Cindy or Jeremy and you're like, yeah, how did you ever end up talking to Derek? It'll be like, oh yeah, he messaged me about campsites or something stupid like that, right? Like, hey, can you tell me where your honey hole is? Like, I really want to know where your favorite spot in Michigan is. It's just, you do that enough time, eventually you get someone who's dumb enough to fall for it. And
I'm sure Cindy told you. She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, no, Cindy was like super helpful. So like before we published the YAT, which is the Uper Adventure Trail, it's our route across the North Shore of the UP. Like I reached out to Cindy, I talked to Jeremy, I talked to a few Upers that I knew. I reached out to a bunch of people who I wouldn't call them like influencers, but like very influential in the Michigan overland community. And I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Um, you know, and I just kind of wanted to get your sign off, not because I think like I need your permission, but I just want to make sure that I'm not, giving away some spot that is really special, to you.
Right.
Because as soon as I hit publish on that, like those GPX coordinates are out of my control. Everyone has, you can download it and share it as much as you want. So,
Right.
like when I did the yeah, I pushed Cindy really hard to be like, hey, do I need to make any changes? Am I too close to this? Am I too close to that? Is it going to be pushing way too many people into these areas that can't really support? Because the last thing anyone wants is another mouth of the Huron situation where you show up and
Right.
there's 15 camper vans and then a bunch of drunks on side by sides. So we worked hard when we did that to make sure that hey, everyone was pretty cool with it. So that's why there's state forest campgrounds instead of dispersed spots on the YAT.
Yeah, I really appreciate you not doing a lot of dispersed spots on the YAT, because
Yeah.
those can get pretty destroyed pretty fast if we start publicly showing them off.
Yeah, and it's like our spot that we go to Labor Day at. Like, it's easy to get to. It's easy to find if you put the work in.
Right.
But I talk to cabin owners when we go up there, and I'm actually a buddy. There's a guy who's got a cabin right by the cemetery, and then there's the last cabin on Wildcat. And I talk to him every time we go up there, and it's like, dude, we never see other trucks coming down here. We'll see like a Jeep very occasionally, and we'll see some side by sides. But he's like, mostly it's just locals who know about this spot. And they're like, the first time you guys rolled through here, like we had a bunch of cabin owners following us because they were like, no way are they gonna get a truck down here. Like, we got like a full size F-150, and they're like, no way they're gonna get that down there. And yeah, sure enough, we did. But it's one of those spots where like, dude, as soon as a bunch of people find out about it, that spot's gonna just be destroyed, ruined, and closed off.
That's like our spot up in the UP, Mark, the one right off that main trail there that is kind of hidden.
Yeah.
With the dam. Once anyone finds out about that, it's going to be taken over. It's such a beautiful spot.
It is a beautiful spot.
And it's like, especially on Michigan, like, dude, if you spend 2 hours putting in the work, you'll find all the cool spots.
Yeah. Even that spot we had in Cadillac, that was a really neat spot for where it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a neat spot.
Yeah, and some of the spots are kind of well known, but they seem to be policed really well. Like our spring shakedown spot, like there wasn't any trash, and like, no, I don't know if that's because the Michigan Jeeps group used it a month before us, and they clean up. They do it. Tom Selmetto does a really good job with his events. They clean up, and they're great. Like, of the Jeep groups in Michigan Jeeps is wonderful. I love them. So that may be why that site was so clean, but it's 2-wheel drive accessible. You could haul in an RV if you wanted. And like, dude, that place, like, I didn't find any trash at all. So that's, that is encouraging.
That seems to be becoming the norm for most spots in Michigan. Like, there's a few spots here in Newaygo County and in Lake County that still have trash, but for the most part, Michiganders do a pretty good job taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell, like, when you roll up on a spot and there's trash and you look at it, you can definitely tell this isn't somebody who's out off-roading who made this mess. It's like, oh, I've got a toilet in the woods. Yeah. That's like, dude, that's some local yokel who didn't want to pay the $5 to get it thrown away at the dump. They just drove out in the woods. And I think that's the most frustrating part for me when, we hear people say, pack it in, pack it out. They're going to close the trails because there's trash. Like, it's like, dude, that's not the overland community, the off-road community who's trashing stuff. No. That's locals dumping, because they don't want to, deal with it.
My thing with that is out west, in like Moab and stuff, they shut down trails because they said there was no proof of use. Well, there was no proof of use because we were taking care of shit.
Yeah, and if I do want to plug Blue Ribbon Coalition, so out west,
For sure.
Blue Ribbon Coalition, what I love about Blue Ribbon Coalition is they're not just sitting here passively accepting these things happening. They're not, I'm kind of over the, oh, daddy government, can I please do this? Can I please do that? Like, Blue Ribbon Coalition is out there filing lawsuits and, organizing lawmakers and pushing them hard to open this crap back up. Like, hey, man, this is our land. Like, you don't get to just shut it down.
Yep.
Like, and it's like, no, we're not going to, they've highly encouraged trail cleanups, but it's not like, oh, like, if you don't do trail cleanups, this is going to get shut down. It's like, no, go police it so locals stop throwing trash out there. Like, why is this? I don't know why the off-road community has to bear the burden of a problem that's not caused by us.
Right, right, yeah. Well, I mean,
it'd be like, it's like DUIs, right?
Off-road.
Yeah, but I mean, besides some beer cans, they're not. We can pick up beer cans. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad about that. But it's like when we're dragging bed frames and stuff like that out of the woods, it's like, that's not a problem that the side-by-side or the off-road community is causing. That's locals.
Exactly.
So, like, and we get all these, it's everything's like, oh, if we don't do these cleanups, they're going to shut down the trails. It's like, when are we going to stop accepting that? Like, I'll do a cleanup if you open trails up. Like, I will happily, I'll get all of MST out there if they say, hey, we're gonna open up 10 miles of trails if you guys clean up 10 miles of trails.
Yep.
Like, we'll cut 10 miles of new trails. Like, dude, I'll make that deal all day. But if you're gonna sit here and threaten me and say, oh, if we don't clean up, and don't get me wrong, we should still clean up. It's the right thing to do. But I don't like this concept that if we don't go clean up somebody's trash who's not part of our community, they're going to shut down the trails that are primarily benefiting our community. Like, that's not a deal I'm going to make.
I wish we had someone in MST or even Michigan Overland who had the knowledge and the money to start fighting the way that Blue Ribbon does.
Yeah, and I think Blue Ribbon actually, they're expanding, right? And I think it's a funding and a legislative, knowledge, because they do it state by state at the state level. So if you wanted them in Michigan, you'd have to say, you'd have to organize the funding for it. You'd have to find, some sort of legal expert, which there's a couple. There's a podcast of a lawyer who handles a lot of DNR and off-road issues here in Michigan.
I will have to look for that.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you after this. But there's there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be in place for Blue Ribbon Coalition to come in and start,
for sure,
throwing bows, which I'd love for them to do, but I just don't know. The funding just isn't there in Michigan.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it'd be nice if everyone in, like, say, not so much MST. I mean, if we all pitched in $5, that's still what, $400,000 or something like that, or for whatever. But if we could get like Michigan Overland or one of those groups involved, and we all pitched in $5, that could maybe make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at Tread Lightly, and Tread Lightly is a good organization that does good things. They do a great job with trail cleanups, but all I hear is, oh, we're trying to preserve access, and good, I want to preserve access, but like, why do I have to fight to preserve access? Like, I want to fight to open more up. And I don't want to fight. It just doesn't seem right as, like, it's our land. It's public land.
Right.
Like, why do I have to fight to preserve access to land that's owned by the public?
And not to throw shade at Tread Lightly, but why do we have to shut down areas to preserve others? Why can't we just keep them all open?
Yeah, I mean, there's some arguments to be made that, like, hey, this needs to be shut down. Just like, if you look at Skidder Hill is a great example, right? Like, if Tread Lightly was to come in and say, hey, we're going to shut down the hill and grade it and put a drain tile in. Like, Is that the right thing to do so that people stop driving through the woods?
Or people just turn around because there's an obstacle there.
Yeah. But, like, I mean, if you've been to Skidder recently, like, I went from one small path through the woods to now there's, and hopefully no DNR officers watch this because then they'll go out there and shut it down. But, or drive a cat, D60 down the dumb thing.
For any DNR listeners, Skidder Hill is in Detroit, Michigan. It's downtown.
Yeah. But, there's an argument to be made that, if something's not done there, we're going to end up with a quarter mile into the woods of trails that were never there. And, okay, is a bypass necessary? Well, kind of, yes, because we want to preserve Skidder Hill because it's an enjoyable obstacle that a lot of people challenge themselves on. But you also need to get to the top from the bottom if you're with a group, and it's like one bypass is plenty.
But now there's like 50.
Yeah, you don't need that rabbit warren of trails there. So there's a healthy medium, right?
Yeah.
And it's managing trails so that it's enjoyable for people and there's some challenges. The DNR doesn't have any sort of concept of managing trails for user types. It's just bulldozer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, there's nobody talking to the DNR saying, hey, wait a minute, how about we do this in an intelligent way where, like 10 Cup, how many times have they bulldozed the mud hole on 10 Cup when you cross the power lines? It's like the Southern Crossing.
Yeah, it's always
they bulldoze that. They bulldoze that maybe once a year, and then by the end of the year, like it's just you got a 4-foot mud pit on either side, and you can barely get through. And it's like, at what point do you look at that and go, "Hey, just leave this because the off-roaders actually enjoy it"? And dude, the spot where the side-by-sides bypass through the woods, that's dry, that's not on a spring, like they're gonna go through there anyway. Make that the go around. And then you don't have 15 go arounds. You got one official one that's on dry, non-spring fed land, and then you solve all the problems that you got.
Yeah. And you don't lose an actually fun obstacle.
Exactly. Now, you might have some, hunter who comes through there in his Chevy 1500 and then complains because he drove into a mud pit, but that can be fixed with tread lightly signage.
That can be fixed with people being left alone.
Well, I don't know if it's dumb as much as, you get mixed use back there.
Yeah.
And you get some hunters, some family out mushroom picking or sightseeing, and they just see a little mud and they go, oh, well, the rest of the trail's got some little puddles on it. This should be fine. And, then they end up, door seal deep in a puddle. So, if you want to keep some of those things, there's a twofold approach, right? Some signage so that people know, so you don't end up, some poor schmuck getting stuck, and then finding something that's going to be a permanent solution. Because, bulldozing those holes every year, there's a spring underneath that. It's just going to come back.
Yeah, here in our area, we've seen a lot of the DNR ruining trails. We used to have one right in Bridgeton that it wasn't anything difficult, but it had the best mud bog in Michigan by far. And that was off, it was right next to the trail. So you could either do the trail as the bypass or have fun. And they filled it all with like probably half inch. It's big gravel. I mean, it's unpleasant to drive over now. Then they shut down almost all of our power line access in Newaygo County, which we used to have open power line access.
Was that always open or was it just unregulated? Because a lot of the power lines are on right-of-ways where it just looks like,
So most of Newaygo County for a long time, the power lines were actually marked DNR trails.
Okay.
But now they've gone through and they've gotten rid of almost all of that.
Yeah, and it seems to be a push. I don't know if that's just because the power companies are saying, "Hey, they're tearing up our access, and we got to be able to get, I don't know what the little semis they got, those the deuce and a half style trucks that they've got have got to get back there." But I can understand the power companies saying like, "Hey, we got to go service these lines, and we can't get our trucks back there." So I get it, right? Like,
but then they put giant boulders across all the trails so nobody can get through.
I think that one was a private property though. Now, Alex, if I remember
No,
correctly.
that one's not private property. That one, it's Newego County property that is leased by consumers.
Yeah. So the problem with a lot of those too, right, is the consumers has a right of way, and maybe not that situation, but there's a bunch of spots all across Michigan where people get in trouble because they're just driving on the right of way, but it's actually private property. It's like
Right.
you wouldn't drive through a farmer's field because there's power lines overhead, but you're driving through someone's back 40.
Mhm.
So that's why Odex and Guy are so great with the public land overview, right?
For sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
But,
it's a lot easier to know where you're going now than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually it's like I've gotten I mean, due to my nature of just feeling very comfortable messaging anyone in the world, I've gotten access to some cool places just because I pulled up, the public lands. I'm like, okay, this guy's name is Bob Johnson, right? And then I'll go through and find Bob Johnson out of the 5 million Bob Johnsons on Facebook and be like, hey, got a question about your property up in the UP. And about 3 days later, like, how did you find me? Well, I'm kind of weird, yeah. Unfortunately for you, your property has some feature that I'm interested in. So, but yeah, I mean that's really nice too because like that closure that was on the where that guy had so many issues with side by sides that he finally got fed up and put a gate.
Yep.
Like I was about to be really, really pissed off and put that guy on blast until I was able to kind of track him down and find out what the real story was. And then that's an interesting one because it's marked as a county road when it absolutely isn't. And he's actually suing Google right now to get it off Google Maps because it shows it as a county road. He's like, he's confirmed with the county road commission, the township, zoning or whatever, and he's gone through like 2 or 3 lawyers to have it all reviewed. He's like, yeah, it's private, buddy, but like Google's marked it public, so people are just blasting down it, and I'm sick of it. I guess his dog got hit and killed, and that was the last straw. Yeah. He said people have drawn guns on him because he's like, he's gone out there to yell at them for, drinking on the side of the property or whatever. And it's like, yeah, this is a private road that we've had open. Well, like without the private, the Onyx or the Gaia, like, dude, how in the world are you going to find out who owns that property besides going into a township and figuring that out?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, Onyx and I used to use Onyx Hunt for that. But now that we've got the Onyx off-road, it is so much easier because I can actually keep track of my trails and see who owns what.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the property view, and it's really interesting too to see kind of like who owns what. And then I really like too because a lot of the timber companies have camping permissions. So as long as you're not lighting a fire like on lime forestry land, you can disperse camp on their land. And that's really cool because they've got some cool land with some cool spots. And a lot of people will look at it and go, oh, private property, I can't go there. But if you know, like I reached out to Lime Forestry Company because I was looking up how to get into Paradise Point by Christmas. And Lime owned all that land except for the 10-foot of access strip. So I kind of developed this relationship with the manager up there. And he's like, oh, yeah. Like you can camp on any of our land as long as you don't have a fire, or I think you're allowed to have like a propane pit or something like that.
A lot of them allow for non-ground fires. So if you have like one of those little pop-up fire pits, you can get away with those too.
Yeah.
Which we have.
And again, it's just about being respectful of them, right? Like, hey, they're very willing to work with you, and as long as you don't abuse it, like, man, that's a really nice because they've got a massive amount of acreage. It's well into the hundreds of thousands of acres that they own. And, boy, you've got access to all that for camping, but you don't know that unless you really dig into it and then have Onyx and Gaia with public land.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I actually didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, if you reach out to the forestry companies up in the UP, like you can find their head office and say, hey, what are your policies on camping? I know Lime does. I'm gonna forget the name of it, but there's one other big one that does as well. They allow you to camp on their land, and I mean that opens up another 300,000 or 400,000 acres of campable property,
Oh
Yeah.
which
That
is really cool.
that's kind of really cool for public relations for forestry too. Like the fact that they have those programs in place. It
Yeah,
makes me more likely to support them than I otherwise would.
yeah, and I think when you really look into their practices, they really do practice responsible forestry because it's a long-term asset for them, right? Like
Right.
they're going to harvest this, and then in 15, 20 years, they're going to harvest it again and then repeat that cycle. They want to make sure that that's there for, future generations as well.
Well, yeah, because future generations of them.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
exactly.
same thing. Same thing with farmers. You hear all the time how bad factory farming is, but really, like I know poultry, but really, those birds are some of the best cared for birds you're ever going to see because it behooves us to take care of them because we get more money then.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because I actually worked on a chicken farm right after high school, and yeah, same thing. Like I think they had 3.5 million, 4 million chicken,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean they that's not just a mom and pop shop. They're measuring every single output and input that's
Yep.
going on there and creating statistical models. And it's like, yeah, the healthier and happier the chickens are, the more they produce. And they figure out, hey, what do we have to do to maximize this? And it turns out to maximize the chicken's egg production, they need to be happy and healthy. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not like, oh, let's just cram a bunch of chickens in a stinky old barn. Like, let's find a way to make sure that they're happy and healthy, and we get more money, and it's better for the chickens.
Right. Well, it's been about an hour. That was a pretty good chat. I'd say we should take this to the Patreon, but we don't have one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so check out if you're listening, check out Mitten State Tours. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Don't tell your friends. We've got too many people already. I can't schedule enough trips unless you want to volunteer to lead trips. Then I'll give you some cool spots to go.
We only have like 2,000 members. Come on, man. There's room for growth.
Yeah. I mean, what I really need now is people willing to step up and like kind of lead their own thing, right? Like, hey, you've gone on a few trips with us. Like, you find people that you enjoy wheeling with. Like, shoot me a message, ask for a route, ask for some spots, and go out with those people that you met that you enjoy. Like, don't feel bad if you're not bringing a ton of people, but like, man, go schedule something.
Yeah, it can't just be the botches scheduling trips. Come on, guys.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, it's Yammer, it's Karen, it's me, the Botches. Bill Brennick does a few, Craig does a few, but like, man, we've got like maybe 10 people who are willing to lead like an organized trips. It's like, come on, we need some of you guys to step up. That's my hope this year is a lot more people say, hey, I'll lead a trip.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're pretty much, I don't want to say we're taking it off, but we're not doing a whole lot before Leatherwood because we got a lot of building to do.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you look at my schedule too, like I don't have anything insane before Leatherwood. And yeah, my hope is that we don't do too much damage because my post Leatherwood schedule, man, we got a lot.
Yeah, we're doing Leatherwood, and then I think a month or 2 months after that, we're going to the Ozarks with Benji.
Ooh, that'll be pretty sweet.
Yeah. But all right, go ahead.
It was great talking to you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right, catch you guys later.
Later.